Hi friends, welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View. And today we have with us a very illustrious guest, Mr. Salih Hudayar. Mr. Hudayar, thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule and joining us. And Mr. Salih Hudayar, he is the Foreign and Security Minister of the East Turkistan Government, which is right now a government in exile. And we're going to talk about basically the struggle for setting up the East Turkestan state and what all this movement is going through. So, Mr. Udyar, my first question is if you could, elaborate a little bit about the this movement to form the East Turkestan as a state. So, a little bit of a background, historical background, and where this movement is right now, and what are the challenges which you are facing.
Yes. Firstly, thank you for having me. East Turkestan is the historical homeland of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and other Turkic peoples. Since 1949, it has been occupied by China, and the Chinese have renamed it to Xinjiang, meaning the colony or the new territory in the Chinese language. Historically, East Turkestan has been an independent country. Um, Throughout history, it's been the base or the center of numerous independent Indo-European kingdoms and Turkic empires, such as uh, the Xingnu or the Han Empire, the Kukturk Khaganate, the Uyghur Khaganate, the Karakhanids, the Yarkand state, and more recently the state of Yetshar or East Turkestan and the first and second East Turkestan republics during the 1930s and 1940s.
Currently, what kind of struggle Uyghurs are facing in, especially in China? What is the Chinese government's attitude or response? Because in Xinjiang province, there seems to be an absolute censorship, and nothing much is coming out. And we have heard, that mosques are being shut, and there's a lot of human rights violations which are going on there. So, how the Chinese government is responding to your movement?
Since China occupied East Turkestan and overthrew the independent East Turkestan Republic back in late 1949, it has been engaging in a brutal campaign of colonization and forced assimilation, which has proliferated to genocide since 2014. At the time when China occupied East Turkestan, Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples were the overwhelming majority, in that we comprised over 90% of the population, whereas the Chinese colonists and the Chinese military forces that they had settled to sent to occupy East Turkestan did not even make up 2% of the population. However, with decades of colonization in an attempt to essentially prevent us from restoring our independence, the demographics have shifted. And in the last decade, since 2014, China has been waging a brutal campaign of genocide and mass internment, interning millions of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and other Turkic peoples in concentration camps and prisons, as well as engaging in forced sterilization of hundreds of thousands of our women, aborting millions of our babies, killing every year at least 25,000 to 50,000 of our youth for their organs, and enslaving millions of more of our people to make the cheap products that China exports across the world. In addition to that, as you mentioned, China has been destroying our cultural. There's no you teaching of our language in schools anymore. There's no texts in our languages anymore. Anything about our history, our identity is being systematically eroded. Over 16,000 mosques and other cultural sites have been destroyed. And not only that, but even our cemeteries, where our ancestors are buried, those have been razed, and the Chinese government is cremating uh, the remains of our ancestors in an effort to essentially wipe out any evidence of our existence in East Turkestan.
So if you can, you recently tweeted, I was looking at your tweet that Sputnik has carried, a story about this thing, the kind of things which China has been doing. So if you can, elaborate a little bit about that, and especially this organ trade. So if you can elaborate a little bit more about that for our viewers.
Yes, I think Sputnik just recently published an article commemorating or one of our historic generals of the East Turkestan Republic, our defense minister, actually, and the role that other Turkic peoples in now the independent Republic of Kyrgyzstan played in our national liberation movement during the 1930s and 40s. As far as the organ harvesting issue goes, I mean, the Chinese government has collected, according to their own state media in 2016, they reported that they collected the DNA samples, voice prints, and retina scans of 36 million people in East Turkestan between the ages of 12 and 65. And every detainee that is interned in the concentration camps and the prisons, they're all they all go through medical checks, and the most healthiest ones, according to experts, most healthiest ones between the ages of 18 to 30, they're selected for organ harvesting. And this is where China's organ harvesting rates have skyrocketed following the mass internment of our people in 2014. And unfortunately, the Chinese government is selling these organs to the majority of the customers happen to be wealthy, Arabs and Muslims from the Muslim world, and the Chinese government is selling them as so-called halal organs. In the airports in East Turkestan. So in many of the airports in East Turkestan that are near the concentration camps, there are special lanes, labels on the floors, on the grounds of the airports, inside the airport, that state for organ transplants only. This in itself shows that this is a very alarming issue. On top of that, to hide, the evidence of the deceased, we're not the people that die in the concentration camps that are having their organs harvested. They're being cremated. There are crematoriums in across East Turkestan, many near the concentration camps, to hide essentially the evidence. And if you know anything, majority of our people are Muslim, and cremation is not something that we do to our dead, to our deceased, because that is against our faith. But the Chinese government, again, to hide the evidence that is engaging in genocide, that is killing our people, are cremating their bodies in these crematoriums.
So, how is the response of the global community towards this thing? Because there seems to be some conversations which are happening around, the your movement. So, and what are your expectations from the global community movement? What is the United Nations response or the other, multilateral organizations or global organizations, especially in view of this massive human rights violations which are going against, the people of East Turkestan Republic?
So many Western governments, especially the United States, as well as the parliaments of over a dozen governments in the Europe, have officially either recognized it as genocide or crimes against humanity. At the UN, a couple years ago, before the Ukrainian conflict, our issue was getting some attention. Many countries condemned the atrocities. They issued joint statements condemning it. However, even the United Nations itself put out a report saying that that what China was doing was at least crimes against humanity. Yet there has been no meaningful action beyond that. Unfortunately, our plight is being ignored. We have a case, a complaint, a formal legal complaint before the International Criminal Court, and we have been calling on governments across the world to support our case and to our case and our efforts to obtain justice by bringing China and its leaders to the International Criminal Court to answer for the ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity. But governments have failed to, take the necessary calls that they've made in the case of the Rohingya. Many governments across the world supported the Rohingya case, genocide case. Similarly, they supported Ukraine's case at the ICC due to the fact that Russia had taken some 25,000 Ukrainian children from their families. Whereas in East Turkestan, the Chinese government has separated over a million Uyghur and other Turkic children from their families and put them into state-run orphanages and boarding schools to be assimilated to become, Chinese. Yet the international community is sadly failing to uphold its obligations under international law, under the UN Genocide Convention to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. However, none of the countries are addressing the root of the issue, and that lies in Chinese colonization and occupation of East Turkestan, because that is the sole reason, the basis in which China is committing this genocide. And so we hope, and we've been calling on the international community, governments and organizations worldwide to, one, recognize the root of the genocide lying in Chinese occupation and colonization of East Turkestan, and to support our people's right to external self-determination and the recovery of our independence and liberty. Because at this point, talking solely about human rights and advocating for human rights has failed us. We've been facing a genocide for the past decade, and despite the I don't want to call it lip service or token condemnations, but in reality, that's what it has become. There has been no meaningful action to hold China accountable. Our issue is not getting the same level of attention and treatment as other various issues. And so we hope that the international community, upholds its obligations, supports, our right to external self-determination, and, assists us in any way to recover our independence and liberty. For that's the only way to ensure our people's survival and very existence.
So when you say colonization, so one part is basically that they are subjugating the people, and the other part is are they also exploiting the natural resources of the area which is falls under the East Turkestan Republic?
Yes, East Turkestan makes up 1,828,418 square kilometers. It's roughly about 1/5 of the territories under the control of what is now called the People's Republic of China, or what we refer to as the Chinese Empire. That being said, East Turkestan holds over 40% of China's oil and natural gas reserves, almost 60% of its coal reserves, over 40% of its rare earth resources and minerals. And this is precisely what China is doing: is it's exploiting our resources, stealing our resources. We estimate annually hundreds of billions of dollars of our resources are being stolen by China. The electricity that is produced in East Turkestan powers over 120 cities in 20 different Chinese provinces. So for China, East Turkestan is essentially their economic lifeline. At the same time, it's a strategic base for China to conduct weapons testing, including nuclear weapons. It's where China has conducted over 46 nuclear tests, which have killed at least 750,000 of our people from 1964 to 1996. And it's believed that China may be continuing to conduct, nuclear tests underground. At the same time, East Turkestan is also the border area in which China is engaging in, territorial expansion into India. For example, in 1962, China invaded India and occupied India's Aksai Chin region and annexed it into the so-called autonomous region, which makes up, which makes up a large part of East Turkestan. And recently, the Chinese have also officially further legitimized their illegal annexation of Aksai Chin. They've incorporated it into two different counties within East Turkestan. So this is, for China, East Turkestan is not only their economic lifeline, but also a strategic base to exercise and to project power into Central and South Asia. And for this reason, it's important that the international community, including India, support East Turkestan, because supporting East Turkestan's independence ensures the security of Central Asia and the security of South Asia, including India's security. And India will have no territorial conflicts with China if East Turkestan and Tibet if and when East Turkestan and Tibet regain their independence.
So, as you mentioned that this province is so rich. The East Turkestan is so rich in terms of minerals and natural resources. But what exactly is the status, socioeconomic status of the people? So, have they got benefited by it, or is it that China is taking all these resources and basically what you call just using them for the Han people? Which primarily basically forms the core of China. Because this is happening in Balochistan also. So there is an armed resistance now going on there. So, ironically, you can say, or coincidentally, China is there in Balochistan also, taking away natural resources from there. But I don't want to draw too much of a simile, but has it benefited, the people of East Turkestan? Which are under subjugation of China, or is their socioeconomic status not that?
Absolutely not. The China's exploitation and colonization of East Turkestan have solely benefited the Chinese colonizers and the Chinese and China itself, but not East Turkestan. Our people remain impoverished, deliberately impoverished by the Chinese state. For example, even all of our wealthy businessmen and entrepreneurs in East Turkestan, they're all serving anywhere from 15 to life in prison, and they have all their assets seized. The Chinese government is further enslaving our people in the concentration, in the forced labor factories to produce, these cheap labor goods that aren't going to be able to be produced in China anymore, because China, the economy there inside China has risen, so it's not as cheap as it would if they didn't use our people for slave labor. So our people are being deliberately kept impoverished and enslaved by the Chinese, and their colonization obviously is not something that benefits the people that are being colonized. This is the sad reality. This is in almost the same case in any other part of the world that was colonized.
My last question, Mr. Dayar, is that how do you see your movement panning out? Because, like as I mentioned earlier, in Balochistan, an armed resistance has come up. So, of course, right now your movement is, on a purely democratic, non-violent path. But ultimately, there is a limit to the things when people are pushed to the wall. So, is there an armed resistance also which is there going on, or is there a possibility of an armed resistance? And how do you see your movement panning out? And what are your expectations, especially from a country like India, because you have mentioned it is the largest democracy in terms of population, and and we have a border with China. And you rightly mentioned that China has usurped a lot of our land. And India does hold a sway in the global community now, especially with the current government being in power. So, what are your expectations? How do you look at your movement panning out? Is there a possibility of armed resistance? Do you think that armed resistance would be justified? And or is it going on already? And what are your expectations from India?
So we had armed resistance up until really 1997, after which the Chinese they were able to effectively crush it using external forces as well, aligning other countries that were once our host nations for our diaspora. And because we don't have a external, territory from which we can operate in, armed resistance has been very difficult. That being said, our people have been resisting to the best of their ability prior to 2014 internally, but nothing was organized. At this rate, while we don't necessarily, you know, we would love to see our issue resolved in a peaceful manner. The reality is, talking about human rights and advocating solely for human rights has failed us. Our people are facing genocide. And the only way to ensure our people's survival is to restore our independence. And independence is something that is not going to come, on its own. It's not something that someone is going to just give to you willingly, and something that we will have to fight for. Our people are ready and more than willing to fight to restore our independence, provided we have, the necessary support and resources from allies and supporters across the world, allied governments and nations. But I think that it is going to be something that is inevitable, because at the end of the day, we're already being killed. We're already being killed, even though we don't have anything. We're not engaged in any armed activities or any violent activities, yet our people are being killed like animals, worse than animals. So at this rate, if it's going to take armed resistance to ensure our people's survival, I think that's the price that our people are willing to pay. And we hope that governments like India and other nations can support our independence, our struggle to reestablish our independence in whatever ways that they can.
Thank you, Mr. Udayar, for this enlightening conversation, and we hope to take this conversation forward and talk to you and members of your government regularly to bring out the plight of your people, in front of the world. And thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule. And if for our viewers, if you have any questions for Mr. Hudayar, you can post that in the comment box of this YouTube video, and we'll take these questions to Mr. Hudayar. And thank you for watching, and thank you, Mr. Hudayar, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.